Now your life is ash.
So I'm a paramedic, been doing this for 12 years. Tuesday night, driving home after a brutal 14-hour shift dealing with overdoses, heart attacks, and one guy who somehow got his head stuck in a mailbox. Rain was coming down hard. I'm 3 blocks from home thinking about beer and TV. I was close enough that I was already mentally rehearsing my honey I'm home routine for Camille. Though let's be honest, she was probably already asleep with her fancy silk eye mask and those ridiculous earplugs because apparently the world was too loud for her delicate sensibilities. The intersection of 5th and Marshall was coming up. You know that sketchy one where half the streetlights are busted? I slowed down because when you've scraped enough people off the pavement, you tend to drive like your grandmother. The light was green, had been green for a good 10 seconds, so I started rolling through. That's when I heard it. The angry roar of an engine pushed way past its limits, tires screaming against wet asphalt like banshees. I had maybe half a second to think, oh, this is gonna suck, before the world went completely sideways. The souped-up Honda Civic came flying through that red light like it was more of a suggestion than an actual traffic law. The kid behind the wheel couldn't have been more than 20, probably hopped up on energy drinks and that special kind of stupidity that makes you think you're invincible. Impact. Pure, concentrated impact that felt like getting hit by a freight train made of spite and poor life choices. My driver's side door caved in like it was made of tin foil. Glass exploded everywhere, tiny diamonds of pain that sparkled in the streetlight. My left arm was making a shape that arms definitely aren't supposed to make, bent at an angle that would have been impressive if it weren't attached to me. The pain hit in waves, starting as a dull roar and building to a crescendo that made my teeth ache. When I came back to consciousness, I was staring up at Jimmy Rodriguez and Sarah Chen from Station 19, 2 of the best paramedics in the city. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now on the receiving end of the same professional calm I'd used on countless patients. "Easy there, Marcus," Jimmy was saying. "We got you, man. Just stay with us." Officer Ronan Pierce showed up just as they were loading me into the ambulance. Good old Ronan, who'd been dealing with car crashes almost as long as I'd been patching up the survivors. We'd grabbed beers together, shared the kind of dark humor that keeps you sane in this job. "Marcus, buddy, we need to notify someone." "You got an emergency contact?" Through the haze of pain and whatever they'd started pumping into my IV, I managed to croak out, "My wife, Camille. Please call her." "At St. Jude's ER, doctor." Walsh delivered the verdict. "Well, Marcus, you've got yourself a nice clean break in your left radius. Should heal up just fine with a cast and some patience. The concussion's mild, but we'll want to keep an eye on that. All things considered, you got pretty lucky tonight." "Lucky?" "Right, I could have been scraped off the pavement with a spatula, so I guess lucky was relative." That's when Betty, the triage nurse, appeared with that particular look nurses get when they're about to deliver bad news. "Honey, we've been trying to reach your wife, like you asked. Called her 3 times now, but she's not picking up. I already knew where she was. Tuesday lunch with Damian Price, her best friend. Trust fund baby who quotes Nietzsche and calls himself an entrepreneur without actually working. Every Tuesday, same trendy cafe downtown, discussing art and literature over $20 salads. Damian was one of those guys who wore designer jeans to look casual and thought having opinions about wine made him interesting. The kind of guy who called himself an entrepreneur, but never seemed to actually do any work unless you counted posting inspirational quotes on Instagram as a legitimate business venture. Camille always insisted he was like a brother to her, which might have been more convincing if brothers typically looked at their sisters the way I'd caught him looking at my wife. But hey, what did I know? I was just the husband who worked 14-hour shifts saving lives while she discussed the deeper meaning of abstract art over $20 salads. The pain meds made my fingers clumsy, but I managed to fish my phone out. The screen was cracked from the accident, but still worked. I typed slowly. "Car accident. I'm at St. Jude's ER. Broken arm. Can you pick me up?" I hit send and waited. Then came the 3 dots that meant she was typing back. And for a moment, I felt this pathetic surge of relief. Maybe she'd panic. Maybe she'd drop everything and rush over like a normal person would when their spouse ended up in the hospital. The response that came back was a masterclass in exactly how not to react when your husband nearly dies in a car crash. "Ugh, Marcus, that sucks. But I'm at lunch with Damien. It's important. Can you get a cab? Let me know how it goes. I read it 3 times. Ugh, Marcus, that sucks. Like I told her I was stuck in traffic. Can you get a cab? Because nothing says loving spouse support like suggesting your injured husband take public transportation home from the hospital. Let me know how it goes. Like my medical emergency was some minor inconvenience she'd check on later when convenient. I stared at that message for what felt like hours, feeling something shift inside my chest that had nothing to do with the accident. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, except the house was my marriage and the cards were all the little compromises and excuses I'd made over the years. Betty came back and I showed her the text exchange. Betty read it, and I watched her professional nurse expression crack slightly. "Oh," she said, and that one word contained about 17 different kinds of disapproval. I typed back, "Okay, just okay." Because really, what else was there to say? That one word felt like the most honest thing I'd said in years. That's when the idea hit me. I knew exactly where she was, and more importantly, I knew she'd be there for at least another hour because Camille never cut these lunches short. They were too important to her self-image. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found Ronan's number. My finger hovered over it for just a moment while the last rational part of my brain tried to talk me out of what I was about to do. "This was petty," it whispered. "But you know what? That rational voice could go straight to hell." I hit the call button. "Pierce here. Marcus, how you holding up, buddy?" "Hey, Ronan," I said, hearing something different in my own voice, something harder, more resolved. "I'm doing okay, all things considered. But I've got a situation with my emergency contact." "She didn't answer her phone," I said, which was technically true. "But I know where she is, the Marlowe Cafe downtown. Maybe you could notify her in person?" There was a pause. "You sure about this, Marcus?" "I'm sure," I said, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I actually meant it. "All right then. I'll send a couple officers over." The Marlowe Cafe was exactly the kind of place that charged $17 for a salad and called it an experience. 20 minutes later, 2 uniformed officers walked in. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Conversations didn't just pause, they died mid-sentence. Officer Janet Mills approached Camille's table with purposeful stride. Every eye in the place was following their progress. "Ma'am," Officer Mills said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent restaurant, "are you Camille Lane?" "Yes," she managed, her voice smaller than usual. What's wrong?" "Your husband, Marcus Lane, was involved in a major vehicle accident earlier this afternoon. He was transported by ambulance to St. Jude's Hospital with significant injuries. We've been trying to contact you for over 2 hours. He listed you as his emergency contact." The words hit the restaurant like a physical force. I could imagine the collective gasp, the way conversations at nearby tables would resume in urgent whispers. "We've been attempting to reach you since the accident occurred," Officer Chen added, his tone carrying just a hint of reproach. "Multiple calls to your listed number went unanswered. He specifically asked us to notify you in person," Officer Mills concluded. My phone started buzzing immediately. First, "I'm on my way." I didn't know it was that serious. She didn't know it was that serious. I'd literally told her I was in the emergency room with a broken arm. Then, "Why didn't you call more than once?" The classic deflection move. Message 3, "Did you seriously send cops to embarrass me? That was cruel, Marcus." She was embarrassed. Her husband was in a hospital bed, and her primary concern was embarrassment. Message 4 was the grand finale. "This is your fault." 3 words that encapsulated everything wrong with our 6-year marriage. Then I got an Instagram DM from Damien. "Hey man, I didn't know about your accident." When the cops came, I was shocked. I asked Camille why she hadn't left earlier. She just shrugged. That's not the kind of person I want in my life. I'm sorry for being part of this mess. Even the guy I'd been jealous of for years was disgusted by her behavior. When asked why she wasn't rushing to her husband's bedside, she shrugged. A damn shrug. That's when my sister Tessa showed up like a hurricane in a power suit. Marketing executive, force of nature, had dropped everything to rush to my side. She read Camille's texts and went nuclear. "Jesus Christ, Marcus," she said, taking in my condition. "You look like you got hit by a truck." "Close," I managed, holding up my phone. "Honda Civic, but check this out. This is the real injury." Tessa read through the messages, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief to controlled nuclear fury. "Are you freaking kidding me?" She said, that sucks about her husband being in a car accident. "Oh, we're done," she said finally. "We are so freaking done with this BS." By the next morning, Tessa had orchestrated the complete removal of Camille from my life with military precision. Morgan movers arrived at exactly 9 a.m. They specialized in relationship transition services. Basically, they were the Navy SEALs of breakup logistics. Rosa, the team leader, took one look around my apartment. "Standard relationship dissolution," she said, consulting her tablet. They moved through my apartment like surgical technicians, carefully identifying and boxing everything that belonged to Camille. Watching strangers pack up 6 years of someone else's life was surreal. They handled Camille's expensive skincare products like they were diffusing bombs, wrapped her designer clothes in tissue paper like museum artifacts, and carefully bubble-wrapped that god-awful $15,000 abstract art piece that looked like someone had sneezed rainbow colors onto a canvas. 3 hours later, my apartment was transformed from a cluttered shrine to someone else's taste into something that actually looked like a place where I might want to live. Amazing how much space opened up once you removed all the unnecessary crap. Meanwhile, Tessa crafted the official notification email. "Camille, your relationship and residence with Marcus Lane have been terminated, effective immediately. Following your response to his medical emergency, this living arrangement is no longer sustainable. Your belongings have been professionally packed and are ready for retrieval. You have 48 hours. Please note that the locks have been changed." The email disappeared with a soft whoosh, carrying with it the official end of my 6-year marriage. At exactly 2:17 p.m., the security camera showed a sleek black Mercedes parked outside. Camille's father, Howard, stepped out looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. For 6 years, he'd called me the steady rock. Not Marcus, but like I was some kind of geological formation that existed primarily to provide stability for his precious daughter's more interesting life. Camille got out looking like hell. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her usually flawless makeup was smudged, and she was wearing yesterday's clothes like she'd slept in them. She didn't look up at the security camera, didn't try to ring the buzzer, just stood there staring at the building. The movers worked with professional efficiency, loading box after box into the Mercedes. 20 minutes to remove 6 years of accumulated relationship debris. When they were done, Howard approached the intercom one final time. "Marcus, if you're listening, the items have been retrieved." "Camille wanted me to tell you." He paused, waiting for her to provide some final message. The silence stretched out for almost a full minute. "She wanted me to tell you that she left the spare key on your kitchen counter yesterday." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a practical note about key return delivered through her father. 7 months later, I'm sitting in the same apartment that now actually looks like a place where I live. The walls have my pictures on them. Shots from work, landscapes from weekend trips. Even that ridiculous photo of me and my paramedic crew after we won the department's chili cook-off. Real life, not the sanitized perfection that Camille had insisted on maintaining. My arm healed up perfectly. The scars on my face faded to thin silver lines, but the real healing took longer. Turns out when you spend 6 years accepting less than you deserve, it takes some time to remember what you're actually worth. Work's been better than ever. Without the constant background stress of managing someone else's emotional needs and social calendar, I've been able to focus on what I'm actually good at. Last month, I got a commendation for handling a multi-car pileup. Funny how much better you perform when you're not wondering if your spouse will be annoyed that you're working late again. Tessa still checks in regularly, though she's dialed back the protective sister routine now that she's satisfied I'm not going to backslide into making excuses for toxic behavior. She was right about everything, of course, but she's gracious enough not to say, "I told you so," more than once a week. About 3 months ago, Camille tried reaching out, one long, exhausting email that hit every manipulation technique. She was sorry, she panicked, she didn't realize how serious the accident was, missed our life, wanted it back. I read it exactly once, then set up an email filter that sends anything from her address straight to the trash folder. The thing about revenge is that most people think it involves dramatic confrontations and elaborate schemes. But real revenge is much simpler than that. It's silence. It's boundaries. It's waking up in a space where no one treats you like their backup plan. Camille chose Rose and risotto over her husband lying in a hospital bed. She chose her social calendar over basic human decency, her trust fund philosopher over the man who'd spent 6 years trying to make her happy. Those were her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. I chose differently. I chose peace over drama, self-respect over settlement, silence over endless explanations that would never be enough anyway. The apartment is quiet these days, but it's a good kind of quiet, the kind that comes from knowing you don't have to walk on eggshells or manage someone else's moods. Sometimes I run into people who knew us as a couple, and they ask about Camille. I just tell them we're not together anymore and change the subject. No drama, no detailed explanations, just a simple statement of fact and a firm redirect. I erased her from my story completely, and I'm writing a better one now. One where the protagonist doesn't accept crumbs and call it a feast, where the hero actually values himself enough to demand better treatment, where the ending involves peace instead of chaos. It's a good story, and for the first time in years, I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out.